The clock arrived on a Tuesday, the same day the final eviction notice came. Ethan stood there looking at this massive, dark wooden monstrosity that had been his grandfather's, thinking it was just one more thing he couldn't afford to deal with. It was scarred. One of the filigree corners was chipped clean off, and the glass was so clouded you could barely see the brass hands beneath. The delivery guys left it right in the middle of his tiny living room. This ugly, burdensome inheritance that smelled like dust and disappointment. His daughter Lily was at another doctor's appointment he couldn't pay for, and all he could think was how he'd have to give this thing away just to get his floor space back. He found a local antique clock collector online who agreed to take it off his hands for free. As he waited for the man to arrive, a strange feeling settled over him. He ran his hand over the rough, scratched wood one last time, and that's when his thumb caught it, a nearly invisible seam along the side panel that didn't match the rest of the craftsmanship. It looked deliberate. His heart started to pound for reasons he didn't understand. He grabbed a flathead screwdriver from his junk drawer, wedged it into the thin line, and with a groan of protesting wood, the entire side panel popped open. Inside wasn't more clockwork. It was a heavy, cold metal box. He lifted the lid, and the air left his lungs. Stacks of gold coins, each one stamped with intricate designs and faces he didn't recognize, filled the container. He was looking at $250,000 hidden inside a broken clock. For months, every day had been the same brutal math. Ethan would wake up and calculate the dwindling numbers in his bank account against the rising tide of bills. The medical debt from Lily's treatments was a monster that kept growing no matter how many extra shifts he picked up. The eviction notice was just the final, official confirmation of what he already knew. He was drowning. He'd look at his daughter, trying so hard to be brave through her illness, and feel a pain deeper than any financial worry. He was failing her. He couldn't give her out. Every toll of the hour felt like a countdown to the day they'd have to leave their home. It wasn't just a clock. It was a monument to everything that was going wrong. He had to know for sure. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan sat on the floor with his laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating the clock's grim facade. He searched for anything he could find about the maker's mark stamped inside the casing, names, models, anything that might hint at some hidden value the deliverymen had missed. The results were a gut punch. His grandfather's prized possession was a mass-produced replica from the 1970s, not some rare antique. Forum posts from clock enthusiasts confirmed it. In good condition, it might fetch a couple $100. In its current state, with the damaged wood and clouded glass, it was practically worthless. The few offers he got were from people looking for free firewood or someone to strip it for the negligible amount of brass. The disappointment was a physical weight on his shoulders. He'd allowed himself that sliver of hope, and now its absence felt heavier than the clock itself. The only logical move was to get rid of it. He posted it on a local classifieds site, his listing blunt and desperate. Free grandfather clock. U-Haul. Some damage. The responses were slow, mostly questions about dimensions he didn't know the answers to. Then, an email from a man named Arthur who collected project clocks. He wasn't interested in the value, he said, but in the challenge of restoration. He could come by Saturday morning. A wave of pure relief washed over Ethan. This burden, at least, would be gone. He'd have his floor space back. The constant, ticking reminder of his failure would be silenced. It was a small victory, but in a life with so few of them, it felt monumental. He replied immediately, arranging the pickup, already imagining the empty space where the dark wood had loomed. Saturday morning, Ethan woke early. The apartment felt different, knowing the clock's time there was measured in hours. He looked at it not with resentment, but with a strange, quiet respect. It was the last physical connection to a grandfather he barely remembered. Why would a mass-produced clock have a hidden panel? It made no sense. He glanced at the clock. The collector would be here in less than an hour to take it away forever. A war erupted in his mind between practical relief and burning curiosity. Practicality told him to leave it alone, to let the mystery go with the clock. But curiosity, that deep, human need to know, won. He went to the kitchen drawer, his heart hammering against his ribs, and pulled out a flathead screwdriver. This was foolish. It was probably nothing, but he had to know. He knelt beside the clock, inserted the metal tip into the faint seam, and carefully applied pressure. The wood gave a low crack, and the entire panel swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing not clockwork, but a deep, dark cavity. The cavity wasn't empty. It was filled with a heavy, rectangular metal box, its dark gray surface dull and cool to the touch. It looked completely out of place, a stark industrial object hidden within the old wood. The sheer weight of it surprised him as he pulled it free, the metal cold and unyielding in his hands. It felt solid, important. He set it on the floor, his fingers fumbling with the simple latch. For a moment he hesitated, a ridiculous thought flashing through his mind that he was violating something sacred, that this wasn't meant for him. The lid opened with a soft click. The interior was lined with faded, crumbling black velvet, and nestled within were stacks of coins. But these weren't the ordinary pennies or quarters jangling in his pocket. They were larger, heavier, and they gleamed with a rich, buttery yellow hue even in the dim light of his living room. He picked one up. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, cool and solid. He turned it over in his palm. One side was stamped with the severe profile of a woman in a crown, her hair intricately detailed. The other side showed an eagle in flight, surrounded by words in a language he couldn't read. The edges were milled with fine, precise grooves. These weren't just coins. They were gold. He knew it in. Same again. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He spilled a few coins onto the worn carpet, their heavy, muffled clinks sounding impossibly loud in the silent apartment. He had to know. He had to be sure. He spread them out, his movements frantic, and began to count. Stack by stack, he separated them. There were 20 stacks. He counted 10 coins in each stack. 200 coins. 200 heavy, unfamiliar gold coins sitting on his living room floor. He grabbed his phone, his fingers slipping on the screen. He searched for the image on the coin, the woman with the crown, the eagle. The results loaded slowly, each second stretching out. St. Gaudens, double eagle, $20 gold piece. His breath caught. The listings weren't for $20. They were for thousands, 10,000, 15,000, more. He scrolled through auction results, his heart hammering against his ribs. The values were staggering, astronomical numbers that belonged to a different world than his. He did the math. The lowest estimates he could find, the most conservative numbers. He multiplied it by 200. The number that stared back at him from his phone's calculator made him lightheaded. $250,000, at least. It was more money than he could even conceptualize. It was every medical bill, the back rent, the eviction notice, the years of anxiety, all erased by a number on a screen. A sob escaped him, a raw, ragged sound of pure relief and disbelief. He put his head in his hands, the cool metal of a coin pressed against his forehead, and cried for the first time in years. The doorbell rang. The collector, Arthur. The real world came crashing back in. He scrambled to his feet, shoving coins back into the box, his heart now pounding with a different kind of panic. He slammed the metal box shut and shoved it back into the hidden compartment, pushing the wooden panel closed until it clicked. He wiped his face with his sleeve, took a deep, shaky breath, and went to the door. "Ethan, what to do next?" He couldn't leave the coins in the clock. The paranoia was immediate and overwhelming. As soon as the collector's truck disappeared down the street, Ethan was on his knees again, prying the panel open. He lifted the metal box out, its weight now feeling like both a miracle and a curse. He needed to hide it properly, somewhere no one would think to look. He emptied out a plastic storage bin full of old winter clothes from the back of his closet, placed the metal box at the very bottom, and buried it under sweaters and coats. It looked utterly ordinary, just another box of things he couldn't bear to throw away. It was only when he was rearranging the last sweater that he noticed it. A small, yellowed envelope tucked into the corner of the metal box that he'd missed in his initial shock. It was thin and brittle. His name was written on the front in a shaky, spidery script he didn't recognize. With careful fingers, he pulled out a single sheet of paper. The writing was faint, the ink faded to a pale brown. "Ethan," it began. "If you found this, then my fear was right. They never stopped looking. This collection was never mine to keep, but it was never theirs to steal back. I took it to protect it from men who would melt it down for the raw gold, erasing its history. They will look for the clock. They believe the secret died with me. Do not let them know it lives with you. The value is in the history, not the metal. Keep your daughter safe. That is all that matters." He read it 3 times, each pass sending a deeper chill through him. The words, "They will look for the clock," echoed in his mind. Who were they? His grandfather had always been a quiet, somewhat distant man when Ethan was a child. He owned a small bookshop, not exactly the profile of someone involved with stolen gold coins and dangerous men. The note suggested an entire hidden life, a history of conflict and fear that Ethan had never known about. The windfall suddenly felt heavy and threatening. They didn't realize he'd been holding. Then the phone call started. His cell would ring from a number he didn't recognize. He'd answer with a hesitant, "Hello?" only to be met with 3 seconds of dead air before the line went click. It happened twice in one afternoon. Telemarketers, he insisted to himself, robocalls. But the timing felt off. It felt intentional. The note's warning, "They will look for the clock," echoed in his mind every time. He started seeing the clock not as a treasure chest anymore, but as a giant target sitting in the middle of his living room. Its steady ticking, which had briefly been a sound of promise, now felt like a countdown to something bad. He couldn't sleep. Every creak of the old apartment building floorboards, every car that slowed down outside, sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. He found himself checking on Lily multiple times a night, just standing in her doorway to watch her sleep, to make sure she was safe. The coins were still hidden in the closet, but he knew he had to move them. The apartment felt porous, unsafe. One afternoon, while Lily was at a follow-up doctor's appointment, an appointment he could actually pay for now, thanks to the single coin he'd nervously sold to a pawn shop across town, he took the metal box and drove. He didn't have a plan, just a desperate need to put distance between this secret and his daughter. He found a different, larger self-storage facility 2 towns over, paid for a small unit in cash under a vague business name, and placed the box on a metal shelf next to someone else's forgotten furniture. As he pulled the rolling door down and turned the key, a small measure of the tension in his shoulders released. The treasure was no longer under their roof. But the fear, that constant, low-grade hum of anxiety, had already moved in. The first step was the hardest. He had to know if even one coin was real, if any of this was real. He found a coin and precious metals dealer an hour's drive away, in a city big enough to feel anonymous. He wore a baseball cap and an old jacket, feeling like a character in a bad crime movie. He only brought one coin, tucked deep in his pocket. The shop was cluttered and smelled of old paper and metal pots. Set the coin down and named a figure that was several $1,000s higher than the most conservative estimate Ethan had found online. It's the real deal. A 1908. Nice details, good condition for its age. You looking to sell? Ethan's knees felt weak. It was real. It was all real. He managed to nod. The process was surprisingly straightforward. He filled out a minimal amount of paperwork, showed his ID, and walked out 20 minutes later with a bank draft for the amount, minus a small commission. He sat in his car for a long time, just staring at the slip of paper. It was more money than he'd held in his hands in years. It was proof. He drove straight to the hospital billing department. He paid off the 2 most urgent bills in full, in person, with the draft. The woman behind the counter seemed surprised, but processed it without question. The relief that washed over him was so profound it was almost dizzying. It was a start. He could breathe. He could breathe. He established a pattern after that. 1 coin, maybe 2, every few weeks. Never the same dealer twice. Always a drive, always paying in cash for whatever he needed immediately. He bought a better used car that wouldn't break down on the way to Lily's appointments. He paid the back rent and the next 3 months in advance, telling the landlord he'd gotten a lucky freelance contract. He bought new clothes for Lily that actually fit, and groceries from the better supermarket without having to calculate the total down to the last penny. He maintained his old routine, going to work, acting like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The crushing weight of desperation was gone, replaced by the careful, calculated tension of managing a secret fortune. He was no longer drowning. He was treading water in a much deeper, much more dangerous ocean. The change was too profound to hide completely. The constant, pinched look of worry that had been etched on Ethan's face for years began to soften around the edges. He didn't jump every time the phone rang with a call from a bill collector. He started humming while making breakfast, a sound Lily hadn't heard since before she got sick. Something, she pressed, leaning against the doorframe. You've been different. He closed the book, his smile becoming a little more careful, a little more constructed. Just picked up some extra overtime, that's all. Things are finally starting to turn around. It was a good lie. It was plausible. It was what she wanted to hear. But she knew her dad. She knew the sound of his voice when he was stretching the truth to protect her. She nodded slowly, not quite meeting his eyes. Okay, that's good. She wanted to believe it. She wanted to believe that hard work had finally paid off, that the universe had decided to cut them a break. But a tiny, persistent doubt nagged at her. This felt like more than overtime. This felt like a seismic shift. He wasn't just less stressed, he was fundamentally different. The weight that had bowed his shoulders for so long was gone, replaced by a new kind of tension, a watchful, careful energy that hummed just beneath the surface of his calm. He was happy, but he was also scared in a way she didn't understand. He was hiding something. She was sure of it. And the part of her that had grown up too fast, that had learned to read the subtle signs of financial worry and parental fear, couldn't just let it go. He was protecting her, she knew that much. But from what? The clock remained. He couldn't bring himself to get rid of it, not after everything. It stood in the corner, its dark wood now feeling less like a burden and more like a silent, stoic guardian of their secret. One afternoon, while Lily was at a friend's house, a rare moment of normalcy he'd been able to afford, Ethan decided to finally fix the broken pendulum. It felt like a gesture of respect, a way to honor the grandfather he was only just beginning to understand. He laid an old blanket on the floor and carefully tilted the massive clock backward, bracing it against the wall. The back panel was held on with simple clasps. He undid them, and the entire mechanism was revealed, a complex, dusty world of gears, weights, and chains. Collection lies with your grandmother's things. Find the key she left you. This was only the beginning. They must believe they found it all. Ethan slumped back against the wall, the small note feeling heavier than the entire metal box of coins. The air left his lungs in a stunned rush. The $250,000. The life-changing fortune that had pulled them from the brink of disaster. It was a decoy, a fraction, a brilliant, elaborate misdirection planted by a man who must have lived in a state of perpetual fear. His mind reeled, trying to comprehend the scale of it. If this was the decoy, what was the real collection worth? $1 million? More? The grandfather he thought he knew, the quiet bookseller, had been a master of secrets, playing a dangerous game that had stretched beyond his own lifetime. The mystery hadn't been solved. It had just gotten deeper, more complex, and infinitely more terrifying. The knock on the door a week later wasn't gentle. It was 3 sharp, impatient raps that echoed through the small apartment. Ethan's heart immediately jumped into his throat. Through the peephole, he saw him, Arthur, the clock collector. His friendly demeanor from before was gone, replaced by a sharp, assessing look. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves, and opened the door. "I was in the neighborhood," Arthur said, his eyes already scanning the room behind Ethan, landing immediately on the clock still standing in the corner. "Thought I'd check if you'd reconsidered my offer. I could take it off your hands today." Ethan's mouth went dry. The man's presence felt like a threat, his interest suddenly seeming predatory rather than hobbyist. "As I said on the phone, it's not for sale anymore. It's a family piece. Arthur took a small step forward, his gaze intense. A man gets a feeling about these things. That clock, it has a story. I can sense it. You sure there isn't something more to it? Something you might have discovered? Interaction confirmed his deepest fear. The secret wasn't safe. Someone was still interested. The clock had to stay. Getting rid of it now would be the most suspicious thing he could do. It had to remain right where it was, a silent, ticking monument to a secret he now had to protect with everything he had. That night, after he was sure Lily was asleep, Ethan went down the rabbit hole. He sat at his kitchen table with his laptop, the only light coming from the screen. He started with his grandfather's name, Arthur Miller. The results were mundane at first, old obituaries, a mention in a local paper about his bookstore's anniversary. But then he added keywords: coin, collection, theft. The search results shifted dramatically. He found a scanned article from a newspaper archive dated 45 years ago. The headline was small but stark. Local rare coin dealer reports major burglary. The dealer's name was Harold Finch. The article stated that over $500,000 in rare, historical gold coins had been stolen in a brazen overnight break-in. The police had no leads. The coins, described as irreplaceable pieces of history, were believed to have been smuggled out of the country and melted down for their bullion value, their cultural significance lost forever. Ethan's blood ran cold. $500,000. And that was 45 years ago. The value today would be astronomical. He kept digging, searching for any connection to his grandfather. It was a community forum for numismatists, a thread dedicated to the Finch theft, unsolved mysteries, where he found it, a user commenting on the suspect list. They looked hard at a guy named Arthur Miller, the post read, a bookshop owner with a known interest in coins. He was friends with Finch, knew the collection, but they never had any evidence, not a shred. The guy was clean. Theory died out. Arthur Miller, his grandfather, a suspect. The pieces slammed together in Ethan's mind with terrifying force. His grandfather hadn't just been a quiet bookseller. He'd been a man questioned in a major theft. A man who, according to his own note, took the coins to protect the low-grade hum of anxiety he'd been living with, would explode into a very real, very present danger. He wasn't just managing the secret fortune, he was sitting on a dormant bomb, and the clock on the wall was its loudly ticking timer. He couldn't keep the coins in the storage unit. It felt too temporary, too exposed. The run-in with the collector had solidified it. This secret needed a fortress, not a rented closet. He spent a sleepless night researching, his laptop glow the only light in the room. Safety deposit boxes, the rules, the sizes, the anonymity. The next morning, he drove to a large, impersonal bank branch in the neighboring city, the one with the granite facade that looked like it could withstand a siege. He asked for the smallest box they had. The process was clinical, bureaucratic. He showed his ID, paid the annual fee in cash, signed forms. The bank employee didn't make small talk. She just led him to the vault, a cold, quiet room, lined with thousands of identical steel doors, and handed him 2 keys. His hands were steady as he turned them in the lock. The small, long drawer slid out with a smooth, heavy sound. He placed the metal box inside, the coins within it, and the 2 cryptic notes from his grandfather on top of it. He pushed the drawer closed, turned the keys, and left. The weight of the secret was still there, but now it was locked behind a foot of steel, in a building with more security than the Federal Reserve. It was the safest he'd felt since prying open that first panel. His next stop was a lawyer's office, found through a web search for found property attorney. The waiting room was all dark wood and leather, a world away from his life. The lawyer, a woman named Ms. Evans with a no-nonsense demeanor, listened without expression as he gave a carefully edited version of the story. An inherited collection, uncertain provenance, a desire to handle things correctly. He left out the clock, the hidden panels, the notes about dangerous men. She steepled her fingers. Found property law is a gray area. Complicated, illegal-feeling plan, but a plan nonetheless. He would be a ghost. He would be careful. He would turn this dangerous secret into a secure future for his daughter, one cautious, invisible step at a time. For the first time in years, Ethan slept through the night. It wasn't a perfect, dreamless sleep. The anxieties of the last few weeks still crept in at the edges. But he slept. He woke to the sound of the clock ticking in the living room, a sound that no longer felt like a countdown to ruin, but a steady, calming rhythm. The first thing he did wasn't check his bank balance or calculate the day's expenses. He just lay there, listening to the quiet of the apartment, feeling a sense of peace so foreign it was almost unsettling. The most immediate change was in Lily. With the most urgent medical bills paid, her treatments became consistent, not a desperate scramble. Color returned to her cheeks. The constant fatigue that had shadowed her began to lift. He watched her one morning, humming to herself as she got ready for school, and felt a lump form in his throat. This was what he'd been fighting for, this normalcy, this simple, unremarkable moment of a healthy child beginning her day. The eviction notice, which had been a permanent fixture on the refrigerator, a black mark on every day, was gone. He'd taken it down, not with a triumphant flourish, but with a quiet, reverent respect. He'd folded it and placed it in the same drawer where he kept the single key to the safety deposit box. It was a reminder of where they'd been, a testament to how close they'd come to the edge. He allowed small luxuries, carefully measured. Real orange juice instead of the concentrate. A new pair of shoes for Lily that weren't from a discount bin. A pizza delivery on a Friday night without the accompanying guilt. These weren't extravagant things to most people, but to Ethan, each one felt like a miracle. He was learning to breathe without the constant pressure on his chest. But the undercurrent was always there. A low hum of vigilance that had replaced the scream of panic. He felt purist, who believed historical artifacts belonged to history, not to private vaults or melting pots. The stolen Finch collection wasn't just currency to him. It was a museum's worth of art, each coin a story stamped in gold. The "they" in his note weren't just thieves. They were a network of wealthy, ruthless collectors and black market dealers who wanted rare pieces vanished into their private holdings or reduced to anonymous bullion. Ethan discovered his grandfather had been a silent partner in Finch's business, the academic mind behind the acquisition of historically significant pieces. When Finch, facing his own financial ruin, made a deal to sell the entire collection to a shadowy consortium with a reputation for disappearing culturally important items, his grandfather had snapped. He saw it not as theft, but as a rescue mission, a desperate, illegal act to preserve what he saw as a public trust. The man who had bounced a young Ethan on his knee had been living with this enormous, dangerous secret. He wasn't just a provider. He was a man who had risked everything for a principle, then spent the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, protecting his family by staying away from them. The legacy he'd left wasn't just a box of coins. It was a moral quagmire, a lifetime of fear, and a desperate act of love that manifested as a hidden fortune. Ethan saw his own reflection in the story, a single father doing desperate things for his child. The understanding didn't make the coins feel cleaner, but it made the man who left them feel heartbreakingly real. The lawyer's words echoed in his mind. The safest legal course is to report it. He played that scenario out. He pictured himself walking into a police station, placing the safety deposit box key on the counter, and explaining everything. The coins would be seized as evidence in a decades-old cold case. There would be investigations, headlines, a circus of attention focused directly on him and Lily. The Finch family, or whatever corporation owned the assets now, would undoubtedly claim it. The legal battle would stretch for years, and at the end of it, he would be right back where he started, broke, with an evict table. Lily's laughter drifting in from the other room as she watched a show, and he made his choice. He would not return to a life of desperation. He would not subject his daughter to that fear again. He would use the decoy money, the $250,000, to secure their future. He would pay for her education, her health, a safe home. He would use it wisely and quietly, exactly as the lawyer and his grandfather had advised. But the rest of it, the true collection hinted at in the final note, that was different. That was blood money on a scale he couldn't comprehend. That belonged to history. His decision was a compromise with his conscience. He would be the guardian his grandfather had been, but he would finish the job. He would use the decoy to save his family, and he would find the true collection. His grandmother's things were stored with a cousin he hadn't spoken to in years, and he would ensure it went somewhere it could be seen and appreciated. A museum, a historical society, somewhere Harold Finch's legacy and his grandfather's desperate act to preserve it wouldn't be erased. He wouldn't be a thief or a saint. He would be a man navigating an impossible inheritance, trying to do right by both his daughter and the ghosts of the past. The weight didn't lift, but it settled into something bearable, a purpose fused with the burden. He had a path forward. The first thing he did was set up a 529 plan for Lily. He funded it cautiously, using the paper trail from the antique machinery sales, making deposits that were significant but not suspicious. It was a concrete thing, a promise locked in a financial instrument that her future was secure. No matter what happened, she would have an education. Next, he found charities that helped families struggling with medical debt, the kind of organizations he'd desperately wished existed when he was at his lowest. He made anonymous donations, the money flowing from one of the shell accounts David had helped him establish. It felt like closing a circle, like using this tainted miracle to prevent someone else's miracle from being needed. He and Lily moved into a small, manageable awareness, the price of admission for the security he could now provide. He watched Lily thrive, her health win-go, her laughter easy and frequent, and he knew the price was worth it. He had learned that some burdens are light because they are filled with hope, and some secrets are heavy because they are paved with good intentions. He was living with both. The clock ticks on in its corner, a steady, peaceful sound in a secure home. Its once ugly casing now seems dignified, its scars telling a story only Ethan knows. It stands as a quiet testament to a powerful truth, that sometimes the most extraordinary value is hidden within the most ordinary things, waiting for the right person at the right time to look a little closer. It's a reminder that beneath the surface of our struggles, beneath the weight of what we perceive as broken or worthless, there can be a revelation waiting to change everything. This is just one story of a hidden truth revealed. There are countless others out there, tales of ordinary objects that contain extraordinary secrets, of forgotten legacies that resurface to transform lives. If you believe in the magic of the unexpected, if you're curious about what might be hidden in plain sight, make sure to subscribe. There are more discoveries waiting to be shared, more stories where a simple twist of fate turns the mundane into the miraculous.